Hey there, I was bored in class, so I played a game of chess. Blindfolded. Just me. Playing against myself. All in my head. Sounds crazy? Maybe, but the game turned out really fun. Some good moves, some bad ones, and a cool finish. Let's take a look. I went for the Catalan opening, because it's a line where pieces usually stay on the board for a long time. It's easy to keep some pressure with white, and that gives you real chances to play for a win. This move isn't one of the main lines, but I played it because I remembered prepping this line as white for a classical game last year. The idea, of course, is to put the bishop on c6 and challenge the Catalan bishop on g2. In this line, black usually goes for long castling and tries to play actively either by putting pressure on the center or pushing pawns on the king side. There are plenty of ways to handle this position, but I like to simply trade off the opposing bishop and give my g2 bishop some fresh air. This move doesn't make much sense. Now, black is stuck with the badly placed bishop on d7, and their pieces don't have much space to work with. White has the better position here, and it's really pleasant to play. It's easy to find natural moves like developing the bishop to e3, castling short, playing h3, bringing the queen to b3, and putting the rooks on the c and d files. Later it might even push the d-pawn, or do something else depending on what black plays. But for black, it's hard to suggest any good plan. Here, mixed up the move order, and that gave my black side a real chance to equalize, maybe even to take the initiative. Now, the pawn on d4 is hanging, and there's no good way to defend it. If all the pieces get traded on the c-file, the endgame is clearly better for black with an extra pawn and open files on the b and d files to create pressure. And if the knight jumps to d2 to attack the c4 pawn, black can even play the bishop to b4 and trade it, especially if the knight is pinned. In exchange for a slightly damaged pawn structure, black has more active pieces, while white has the bishop pair and a king that's still struggling to castle. So overall, the position is objectively equal. Black is taking advantage of white's weak light squares and still holds on to the extra pawn. Objectively, black is only slightly better, but in practice, I think the advantage is much more serious. This is a blunder. The queen is hanging. This is the correct move order. Now, the move e3 works perfectly, and we're heading straight into the position that soon appears in the actual game. Now, white doesn't have to worry about castling, it's already done. And trading queens isn't a good idea here. If black recaptures with the knight and brings the other one to d6 to protect the pawn on c4, then e4 loses its bite, because there's no e5 threat anymore. Knight to d5 is a weak move. Black should have gone for queen to d7, like we saw earlier. A very interesting move. It was actually part of my prep for that classical game I mentioned earlier. We'll see the idea behind it in a moment. Playing b4 right away was also an interesting option, but I don't want to overwhelm you with too many sidelines. I encourage you to analyze the move b4 yourself with an engine, and with your own brain. Even though the pawn push on the h-file isn't too dangerous here, the idea itself is definitely worth remembering. This is the idea behind the earlier moves played by white. In positions with opposite side castling, it's common to push pawns toward the enemy king. Here, the pawn is attacked more times than it's defended, but taking it opens up a file white can use to launch an attack. People often say we push pawns to break the king's defenses, but I'd add that sometimes we also do it just to get rid of our own pawns and open lines for our pieces. This move has both a strategic and a dynamic justification. Strategically, if we trade off this knight, then every time white plays their knight to c3, it will be exchanged, which slightly reduces the pressure of their attack, and the dynamic side of it will become clear in the upcoming lines. The dynamics of this position are hard to explain with words. I'd say white is struggling with piece coordination, while all of black's pieces are working really well together. I recommend analyzing this position with an engine to truly understand the underlying dynamics. I'll just show one sample line. I know it sounds crazy, but black is the one with the advantage here. It's a very similar idea to the one we saw earlier. Just like before, I recommend checking out this line with an engine. The knight is jumping into the attack now, and c5 would be the perfect outpost. This is a quiet, prophylactic move, and it really pays off later when the knight jumps to b5, because the king ends up supporting the a7 pawn. Bringing the last piece into play is usually a good idea, but in this case, it's a small inaccuracy. White should have played the knight to e4, from where it could jump to c5. Now black had a chance to stay in the game with f5. Taking away that key square, the knight shouldn't go to c5 via 4, because of a tactic we'll see later in the game. Still, it's worth noting that black's position would have been worse either way. This is a losing mistake. Now white can go for the knight maneuver, knight to e4, then to c5. The plan is good, jumping to the c5 square, but the execution doesn't work tactically. Both the queen and the knight are under attack. White is still slightly better, more active, and the pawn push could break through. Black should try to stop it, and their last move c6 helps a bit by limiting white's bishop. After any capture on g3, taking back with the f-pawn might look odd, but it creates a passed h-pawn. Still, black has decent chances to hold. I didn't see the knight to a5 idea, so I couldn't really defend this position. I had to make a move, so I played rook to h6, hoping that if white slips up, the rook might help later along the 6th rank. Pause the video and try to find the best move. This is your last chance to pause the video before the move is revealed. And this is where I, playing as black, decided to resign. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, it really helps the channel. And if you've never tried blindfold chess before, I highly recommend it. It's a fun and challenging way to improve your calculation, memory, and focus. See you in the next one.